Hello, everyone. Welcome. We are so excited for our webinar tonight. Today's session is entitled Customizing CK-12 FlexBooks and Adaptive Practice. I'm Dan, one of the CK-12 members, and my colleague Katie and I will be running today's webinar. Before we get started, I just wanted to take a quick minute to make sure everyone is comfortable with the Zoom webinar platform. You should see two different options on your Zoom screen. One for a Q&A and one for a chat. So during today's presentation, whenever you have a question about CK-12, please post that in the Q&A window. The chat window we're going to be using as a place for community conversation. So we'd love for all of you to introduce yourselves. If you're an educator, please feel free to share where you live, the subject you teach. Just make sure it's in the chat window that you're sending any general posts to everyone so that everyone can see your posts, not just to the CK-12 or the panelists.
Thanks, Dan. So today's session is going to cover the following topics. Flexbook editing, we'll talk about customizing, combining, rearranging, editing, creating Flexbooks and lessons, and even related content in our 2.0 Flexbooks. We'll also talk about customizing practice, so how to create a quiz on CK-12s using quizzes independently or in Flexbooks, and then the reports that you get based on that. And then the last thing we'll talk about is what you can do after you customize. So how to assign or share, publish, post on a school's page, and more than that. We have about an hour for today's webinar. It's going to be really quick, so I'm going to try to touch on some of the pieces. But with that in mind, knowing that it's kind of a surface overview, we do want you to understand that the big ideas on Flexbook practice, and at the same time, you may decide that you actually want to go back and check little pieces. And so based on that, we've actually created a playlist of quick overviews. We will stay on, we'll do some live demo, we'll answer some questions, but you can always find more information by going to these. They're little 2 to 5 minute videos, and you can find them on our YouTube channel or linked directly from the bottom of our webinars page. They cover topics like uploading and formatting images, finding and using embed codes for interactives, related content, which we'll talk about today too, customizing practice, and learning management system integration, and more. So definitely know that today's webinar isn't the only place that you can find help for customization on CK-12.
So we hope you're as excited as we are. And with that, let's get started with editing CK-12 FlexBooks.
Great. So if you're starting with a CK-12 Flexbook, or one that someone else has made and you find published on CK-12, the first thing you can do is click Customize, and that will make a copy that you can then begin to edit. Now, if you want to pull from multiple existing books, you can use the Add to Flexbook or Add to Flexbook 2.0 options to add individual lessons, chapters from our legacy content, or whole books to an existing or a brand new book. So that's your way that you can kind of combine things together. You can also go to your library to start a new Flexbook or Flexbook 2.0 from scratch. We do recommend as much as possible staying in that 2.0 world. You'll get the best options out of that. And that library is also where you'll find any work that you've customized or created. So when customizing a Flexbook, the first thing you're going to want to do is look at the table of contents. And there you have the options to delete sections or even whole chapters and to reorder your lessons. This can be especially helpful if you're adding in new content. So if I use that Add to Flexbook option, it's going to put that content at the bottom of my Flexbook. And one note, and I'm going to say it multiple times over throughout this thing, make sure you're not actively doing two things at the same time. So make sure that if you're adding to FlexBooks, you're not also actively editing that same book at the same time. But that allowing you to reorder is going to be really important so you can get things exactly where you want it to be. The other option that I just kind of hinted at was this idea of adding content. And you can do that using the Add to Flexbook option when browsing, or inside a Flexbook, you can actually add a new chapter, a new lesson, pulling from content in the CK-12 library, or starting one from scratch from there. And those new lessons that you create can be a traditional text lesson. They can be a bucket for embedded media, or some combination of interactivity and text as you go. And so our recommendation is, as you're doing all this editing, edit in one tab. Just stay in one tab, do all your work, open it up, click edit, click customize, whatever that is, save your work, and move forward from there. That will avoid any issue where you did work and then you moved to something else, and you want to make sure that you're saving your latest version as you go. So a couple things when you get down into the actual lesson edits. So the first thing you can see is kind of that edit bar at the top. You got your standard bold, italics, underline, all those fun things. But I want to point out a few specific things here that you might not be aware of. And so the first thing is that you can directly adjust or write any text, use the formatting for the special media. And then we have two options when you want to come to math text. And so the first one is that M at the top right next to the strike through option. So if you want, let's say y equals 2 plus x to be nicely formatted as math text, you can just write that out and click the M and it will convert it. If you know coding for LaTeX for math, you can also write that directly in a lesson and click the M to convert it. And that will allow you to continue working and type as you go. But if you're unfamiliar with how to code text for mathematics, that little X in the curly brackets at the bottom will give you our math editor pop-up. And this will allow you to use our drop-down options to actually create formulas and equations and different pieces there. So definitely know that if you know it, you can shortcut it. If you don't know how to use that piece, by all means, use our full math editor and put it in there. The next piece I want to talk about is adding images. So we do ask you to add images cleanly into the text and not just kind of paste them in there, because we want to make sure that we are using the right attributions, know where that image came from, fits inside our license and all of that. So what you're going to want to do from there is go ahead and look at the top where you see the little image icon. It's got a little picture of a mountain and a sun above it, or maybe a moon, who knows. And then when you click on that, you get your image pop up. And this allows you to upload a file. You can note the attribution, whether it's your image or you don't hold the copyright, pick one of the options that's available there, and go ahead and add that image and format that accordingly. So check that out as well if you want to kind of enhance your text with various images. Another option we have just to the right of that is our media option. And it looks like a little play button. And there's a couple options here. So when I open that up, it'll get me on the general piece to start. And let's say I have a YouTube link, just a link to a YouTube video, or I could use a link to a CK-12 quiz or Vimeo or things like that. I could just put that link for some basic places that you'd expect in that source piece and insert it that way. I can actually shortcut that even further by just pasting the YouTube link inside the text, and it will add it as well. But that's for some little pieces. The other option is to pull an embed code. And if you want to add extra pieces for that, you want to change the formatting edges of that, go ahead and pull an embed code from YouTube, pull an embed code for our quizzes, pull an embed code from our interactives. And that you're going to just click on the embed option and paste the embed code there. So two different options to insert media, but that frames it and puts it directly in the text. And the last kind of interesting, slightly different option is our templates option. So that's the little stamp option that's right here. And when you click on that, it will give you a pop-up. And we have a few different options. I'll show them to you live in a minute, but they include an element box, some different like did you know or connection options, and even a collapsible box option. And these allow you to add formatted pieces within your lesson and then add content within there. So keep those in mind as some things that you might not see in like a normal Word doc, but that will add and enhance your lesson if you're customizing or creating content. That was the edit tab inside a lesson. Now, when you're editing, you also have a few other tabs to work with. So the first one after that edit option is our resources tab. Here's the option to upload files. So like a PDF or a Word doc, worksheet, things like that that you want to upload and make those available to your students or colleagues. Just make sure that whatever you're uploading fits under the license and terms of our platform. And let's say I upload this while I'm editing. When I click on that and I save it and go there, you'll find those resources under the toolbar in our 2.0 lessons. And then when you click on that piece under that toolbar, you can see it kind of pop out just inside that. And you can see in this case, the biology answers for chapter 2. So that's a great PDF example of something that you could upload and share as part of that lesson. The next one after resources is details. And this includes the description of the lesson, learning objectives. It's also where you're going to put any new attributions. Let's say you wrote some of the content and a colleague of yours wrote some of the content and you want to make sure that you cite both of you. All of that information, that kind of metadata, key information for the lesson goes inside the details piece. And so once you do that, same deal. right toolbar under concept details, you'll then see, in this case, the description, objectives, vocabulary. The author for this one is CK-12 Science, and you can kind of see all those details about the lesson there. And then the last option that I want to talk about is our related content. And this is one of the reasons why I recommend FlexBooks 2.0. What we tried to do there is pull together all the pieces, our text, our practice, and then all of these other options to help expand the learning and make it accessible right at the fingertips of you and students. And so in this case, you'll see a lesson plan, a study guide, a video, a real world application, and I think that's a Plix actually there last. And so you can go ahead in and you can remove related content that we've put in. You can add your own related content there. The lesson plans will only show up for teacher accounts. So that will be a great thing that you can see, reference, and that your students that are accessing it in an assignment aren't going to have to worry about that part there. But once I add that, again, surprise, surprise, it shows up under the toolbar under related content. And here, when I click on that related content, it pops open and you can see the same things, that lesson plan, study guide, video, real world application, and Plix related to that particular piece. So super fast, just kind of giving you some pieces. So let's actually take some time to go into the platform and see what this looks like live. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And hopefully this means you can now see our CK-12 homepage. And if not, Dan, go ahead and stop me at any point during this. But I'm going to look at this first. And I find it easier to start with something that already exists on CK-12. So let's say I am teaching Earth Science. I can go to our Earth Science. For our middle school and high school content, that's going to open up the 2.0 Flexbook assigned there. And I can see different chapters, different pieces. I could go ahead and explore. But let's say I want to customize this. Next to my choose button, I'm going to click customize. And what this is going to do is it's going to create a copy of the structure for this particular piece and put that in my library. I often recommend that you put like your school name or your teacher name at the beginning and replace that CK-12 so you know that this is your version of the book and not the version that CK-12 made. And that will help you kind of track what's happening in your version versus our version. At this point in time, I don't know about you guys as teachers, but I never made it through a whole textbook. So let's say we're going to get through most of this content, but maybe we're not going to get to the solar system. Maybe that's covered in another science class. So I could say, okay, well, we're going to remove this chapter. And I'm going to just click on the X again to remove the other chapter. And I can kind of see those pieces there. I can actually move a chapter and swap it, and it will renumber everything, even the content within that. You can see it's all now labeled for chapter 20 instead of chapter 21. And I can expand both of these and say, okay, well, let's combine these. Maybe I want to put this in here. And let's probably doesn't make sense. So let's go ahead and put it back in that chapter. But I can easily rearrange and reorder. I could change the title of this and maybe say Earth's energy and materials, and then just keep the lessons I wanted, drag them into a similar chapter. All sorts of options as you go through. But this is what you would actually be able to play around with. So your major pieces, deleting, reordering. I can actually expand any of these lessons and say, right here, I can reorder. Go ahead and put it back. I can edit, rename, or I can move this. If I want to jump multiple chapters and I don't want to have to drag it, I can just be like, okay, well, let's move this all the way down to Earth's energy. And you'll see that atoms and molecules just move down to Earth's energy. Or I can move it back to chapter 3. And it's going to show up at the bottom. And then I can put it kind of wherever I want it to end up being within here. So however I want to go ahead and play with that and order and reorder and go from there, all sorts of options. I can choose to do a few other things. I can choose to, let's collapse this just so I can see, I can add a new chapter. So example for webinar. And then inside that chapter, I could add a new lesson and say lesson 1 for webinar. That's how you kind of create new content, a new structure. If I didn't want that lesson inside there, I could put that outside. But I find it really easy to use our newer, they've been around for a year or so, chapter, new read or new lesson options. or I can search across CK-12 and pull content using our search button. So different ways to add content from within this editor. I've talked about the title, talked about reordering stuff. Here's our resources for the book. Here's the details for the book. I might say like my school version and then update whatever this looks like. I could add other attributions or grade level pieces at any book level or chapter level option, or lesson level option. And then let's actually go into one of these particular lessons and do some editing. So right now, the only thing that lives in my library is the book structure. Everything inside that is just a shortcut link that's pointing to CK-12 content. And that's great because if we decide we want to update that, you'll get an option to see that we have newer content. Maybe we put in a new interactive, and you can just pull that content directly into the book. Totally fine. But the minute I click edit on this lesson, it's going to also create a copy of the lesson, or what we call a read, in my library. And so now everything in this book points to the CK-12 content except lesson 3.7, which when I do this is going to point to my own content and my own version. So we would never, ever want to override what you're doing, which means that at this point, you've made a distinct split for this content, and you're going to want to go ahead and just make any changes that you want. And if you decide you really like the newer version we have, you can go ahead and pull that in later on. But this is yours. It's going to live here. It's going to live in your library, and you're good to go. So as I go through here, let's talk about some of the things we can do. So one of the things we talked about was images. So let's say this image is fine, but maybe I want to replace it with my own image. So I could go ahead and delete this. To replace an image, I'm going to click on that image option. I'm going to choose the file. We're going to upload it cleanly. And I'm going to click open. Now, this URL is going to be relevant once the image is inside CK-12, but we do not recommend that you pull a URL for an image on the web. Web pages change all the time, and you are most likely going to end up having a broken link in the long run. So we recommend that you upload the image cleanly on here. Now, let's say I had pulled this image from Wikimedia or something like that, where I didn't hold the copyright. We allow images under the following licenses. So go ahead and check those out and make sure that what you're adding fits one of those licenses, because that's what fits inside our terms and our options for here. Because we can cleanly link to those licenses. We can cleanly show those options for images. And so that's what your options are as you're uploading. The other option is the I hold the copyright option. Now, in this case, this is a picture that I took myself. There's nothing copyrighted inside that I have to worry about. So I'm going to note I hold the copyright because I work for CK-12. The source is just going to be CK-12 Foundation, and the credit's going to go to me. And then I'm going to note that I am now licensing it under the CK-12 terms, and it's going to show up under the CK-12 curriculum materials license for other users. And this pixel width is really big, so let's go ahead and drop that down to maybe a more reasonable size as I insert that. So I can go ahead and I can insert this in this lesson, and it's going to show up here as that image. If I click on that image again, I can go ahead, you'll see all of the information that I put in there. We have some options. So this image is showing up inline. I could pick a figure, which has like a thumbnail size or full page size or postcard size, all based on width. So just keep that one in mind as you go. I could add a caption if it's a figure, so that's a little bit different. So seasons in New England. And one of the things I want to do is make sure, just for accessibility reasons, that I put any alt text in here. So I might say fall foliage, just so that there's something there to understand what that looks like. And I can insert that accordingly. And now you'll see the caption here. And when I preview this, or I should save it, the alt text if I hovered over that on what it would look like. So a couple different options in terms of formatting as I go through from there. You can see the text that we have here. We have some different pieces. Let's say I wanted to add something within this lesson, maybe after the review. I could put something here where I could say, okay, let's add an element box. Or did you know? And I can save that, and it will input this lovely little formatting. Did you know that seasons aren't the same in the northern and southern hemisphere. So you could put something like that to kind of enhance and add other pieces. So definitely check out the templates that we have available there. Another piece we talked about was having some embedded options here. So I actually opened up a Plix that has to do with seasonal changes. So this is a great cross-curricular option because this is an earth science lesson. This particular Plix is actually a life science Plix. And if you haven't seen our Plix, by all means, go ahead and check out how they work. You got a little description, get a little bit of an interactive here. I can see the challenge questions that go in here, all the rest of that. But if I want this Plix to show up inside my lesson, I can click on more options. More options shows up under your ellipse. Pull up an embed code, and there's two options for Plix. One is a basic and one is a complete. The basic, we'll actually just do both of these so you can see what they look like. I'm going to copy this to a clipboard. We're going to put a basic Plix activity. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click on my embed media option. And this is an embed code. So I got to switch over to this embed option, save it, and paste it in there. And then just so you get to see what it looks like, the full Plix, we'll go ahead over to there. Same deal. I'm going to copy this to my clipboard, back to my media option, embed option, paste it, save it, and we're good to go. You can do the same thing for Sims. You can pull an embed code from YouTube, all sorts of options. So definitely play around with that in terms of embedding options. But keep in mind that for Plix, you'll see two different options. And this is a newer choice, that preview option. So I can click on preview and you can actually see what this looks like. So here we have our seasons, the text, content, and then this embed just gives you the description and the actual interactive component within a lesson. Whereas this full Plix launches the whole Plix with the questions and everything that goes with it. And then you can see my little did you know. So we've talked about some different pieces. We can highlight, bold, italics, center that text, put it back left, kind of all your standard formatting options. But the last piece that we talked about was math formatting. So I'm just going to put an example math format in here. Maybe we're talking about temperature options, and we can talk about converting like Fahrenheit equals something times the Celsius temperature plus whatever that looks like. And so if I wanted this, I could use my nice little math formatting option. And then we could go ahead or I could say, I don't know how to format any of this. And I'm going to go ahead here, click on this, and I can write anything I want. Y equals 5/9, all sorts of fun things as you go through from here. And you can see this lovely little formatting. So different options for math, that's going to show up as you go through. Definitely play around with the math editor. If you don't know how to use it, click on it again and use our little how to use the math editor choice at the top. So those are probably the four big ones that are a little bit different than you would normally see within kind of a Word document. So I wanted to point out what those look like within the actual lesson edits. And then let's do some other stuff. We got over to our resources. I can upload a PDF file or something else. My details describes how and why seasons occur. You got some pieces here. Maybe I can put in temperature as a vocabulary word. And actually, we have a really cool definition option right here. So I could even put in term or temperature, and then the definition of temp. So go ahead and add in all the pieces that you think might be most relevant, extra tags, search keywords, whatever you're looking for. And you'll notice that this is tagged to the seasons concept. Because this is 2.0, our last option is that related option. Looks like we have a real world application attached here. I can add other resources. So I can click on add modality. It's going to start by searching in seasons. So I could choose to say, okay, I want this video added as well. Maybe this real world application, a shadow length on Plix. Go ahead and add those. I could say, here's a simulation that I maybe want to add that's maybe not tagged exactly to the concept, but I can go ahead and add that to my library. I could even add this Plix to my library. All of your options are under this ellipsis. So go ahead and add this to my library. And then if I want to add those here, instead of doing this, I could search in my library. And we probably want to do the actual seasonal changes. There's my Plix. Could add it separately. Or the Salty Roads option. And there's the sim that I had added. And now we have some options. I've made a bunch of random changes. I can keep this as a draft, and that will kick me back into the editor that I was working off of. Or I can finalize this draft, and that will show you what it looks like. Now, don't worry, it's not final. It's just that when I say finalize my draft, I'm going to push those changes out, and anyone that has access to this lesson will be able to see that updated lesson. So you can see here that new picture, content, kind of what we were previewing with the Plix in different options. And then under my toolbar, under related content, I now have all of these choices as well. So you have some different pieces as you go through from there. Your resources, if I had uploaded any, my concept details, if I had uploaded any, all sorts of options. So just keep those in mind as you go. We can close out those other two pieces. This was the tab that I was working in. I have saved all of my changes. And I'm going to do one more thing before we stop for questions. And that is help you figure out where things are and how you can add to that lesson. So this was an earth science book. And a lot of high school science classes intermix earth science with some other areas. So I could go to my subjects menu. Let's say I wanted to mix it with physical science. Instead of choosing to customize, I can choose to add this book to the book I was just working on. When I click add to FlexBook, you'll see that this is the one we just made today. And I'm going to submit this. And it is going to add this whole book, all of the lessons and chapters, to that earth science book. Now, I did that when I wasn't actively editing. So that's a good thing to remember. And then I'm going to go to my library, which you can find at the top on CK-12, or if you're in 2.0, under your name. And you'll see here that you have my school or science for middle school, and the one lesson that I customized, along with the Plix that I added there, and then this other lesson that I added by hand, and my Salty Roads one, because I'd added those pieces there. If I open this up, hopefully you guys can answer this, but my content that I added in, that whole physical science book, is going to show up at the bottom. So just like we did when we were moving stuff, you can see all of this information. So here's my example for webinar. And then everything below this is my physical science content, because I added that whole book in. And if I wanted to make more changes from there, I'd go ahead and I click edit. And notice I'm not customizing. Customizing makes the copy, edit allows you to go in from there. So let's take a break for a few minutes and see what questions we have. And then we'll talk about practices and quizzes next. How are we doing on questions, Dan?
Thanks, Katie. Yep. So just a reminder, if you have questions, make sure you put them in the Q&A below. We have had a few questions come in. We'll just quickly go through a couple of those that we think might be useful for everybody. So LaFawn had asked, will this presentation be available for us after this? And it will absolutely be available. So we will post this. Usually it takes about 24 hours or so. But if you want to reference this or share this with coworkers or colleagues, you'll absolutely be able to do that. Cindy had asked, when I add my own content, does it become available for all CK-12 users? And Laramie had answered that only if you publish it, then it appears under the community contributed tab. You can share the URL even to a whole class, to a lesson, without publishing it. That way it's only visible to the people you share it with.
Dan, I'm just going to stop for one sec. That option we're going to talk about at the end of this webinar, but we won't be live. So under the same choose option, that publish is what makes it available for others. Otherwise, I'm just going to share this link at the top to my FlexBook with the people that I want to share it or assign it as I go.
Great. And one more, Victoria asked, are you able to see by each student if they open the link, whether external or Plix?
No. So you can see the grades for attached practice or quizzes to a lesson, and you can see in 2.0 where they spent their time. So if it's like embedded, it'll give you a sense of how long they spent on that one part there, but it doesn't necessarily show you directly if you open it. unless you assign that related content separately. And that related content has the option to assign it separately. So that's what you'd want to do. And if you're looking at assignments, a lot of our other webinars, kind of our introductions, flexible learning ones, all talk about assignments. So definitely check that out if you've missed that.
So if you guys continue to have any extra questions, please just put them in as myself or Katie are talking. But I think with that, we can jump into the next part of the webinar, talk about customizing practice into quizzes. Before we do go to the next part, I just want to mention that in previous webinars, we've discussed the CK-12 adaptive practice, which adjusts to students' skill levels and even offers recommendations for further learning. You're always more than welcome to use that tool, but if you want to tailor that student experience, you can create what we call a quiz on CK-12. So before Katie goes into how to create a quiz, I just want to make sure that everybody understands the differences between quizzes and adaptive practice. They both can pull from our database of over 150,000 math, science, and spelling questions. However, quizzes also give you the option to create your own questions and use them. You can assign the quizzes like practice, but student reports are based on the percentage of questions they got right. Unlike practice, which aims for a goal of 10 correct, regardless of how many questions are completed. You also have various options for those quizzes, from picking the order of questions to setting time limits. You can remember that CK-12 won't override any of these choices by adapting to student performance or stopping them to provide recommendations. If you want those features, you have to use the CK-12 adaptive practice as is. So with that background information, let me pass it back to Katie to talk about how you can create your own quizzes.
Awesome. Thanks, Dan. So to create a quiz, you can begin one from scratch in your library, just like you can for a FlexBook. And actually, we didn't get to that, so I'll make sure to show you both options when we go live. And then you can pull existing questions from our database. We have over 150,000 questions in our database. Or you can create your own questions for your quizzes. So that's an option. The other option is to customize our existing practice. And you can do that. You can see a couple different options depending on if you're in our older lesson, directly browsing practice, or inside a 2.0 lesson. And that's probably the one we'll stick with for today, just from a timing perspective. But you have multiple options. Anywhere you see customize on practice, you can take that and convert it to a quiz. And so once you get into our quiz editor, you're going to want to start by picking a title for your quiz. Now, I generally recommend that that title indicates the purpose or the topics covered. That's going to be much easier to use later on than if you just put a date like May 12th, because I have no idea what I taught May 12th on May 15th, let alone a year later. And then you can add a description of the quiz. Just note that that description is only available for you. It doesn't show up for students. So it's just kind of your reminder when you're in the editor. Once you have a title, you can choose your setting options. And this includes limiting the number of tries a student gets to complete a quiz, setting the time limit for the whole quiz. In general, you're going to want to stick with English as your language, as that's the option for the majority of our questions. But if you want to write your own questions in another language, you can currently see options for Spanish and Portuguese based on other quizzes that have been made that have lessons and questions that way. And you can pull from questions that might be available in those languages based on work that our partners have done for those languages. So note that that's kind of a newer feature and it will be helpful, but there are limited questions outside of our English questions. Below that are the options to allow students to see hints, to see solutions for questions after they answer them, and to auto shuffle the questions for each student. Now, if you pick the auto shuffle option, you'll lose the ability to choose the order of questions within the editor. So just keep that in mind. If you're having trouble reordering, it might be that you picked the shuffle question option. And the final option allows students to pause their quiz and resume later. So this is especially useful if you're using a custom practice as homework versus some sort of timed quiz, because that will allow them to start it in class, pause, and pick up when they get home. Otherwise, they will have to start over again with their next option. And then we can talk about adding and ordering questions. So once you've picked your general settings, it's time to pick your concepts and questions. If you started by customizing practice, you'll see the first concept already included, which usually defaults to randomly select 20 questions from any available ones in our system. And then if not, or if you want to add additional concepts, you can go ahead and choose the Add Question Set option, search to find a CK-12 concept to pull in, or choose create new questions at the top there if you want to write your own. And if you include multiple concepts, you can see the order of the concepts noted. So it's going to go through the 5 at the beginning, the next 5, and then whatever new questions you added. And then to reorder, just hover over that number and drag the box before or after another concept. Once a concept is included, you can adjust the number of questions, at which point the system is going to randomly select a variety of easy, medium, and hard questions, variety of types to match the number you selected. This is a super awesome, easy way to adjust the number of questions, but it's going to reorder and repick questions to balance those out every time you reset this number. So if you have taken the time to handpick your questions, don't reuse this option after, and we will warn you each time, don't worry. Now, if you want to handpick which questions are included, go ahead and click on that little pencil edit icon, hover over top up. Like if you hover over the box, it'll show up, and then click on it, and it will open up the randomly selected questions and any other questions available for that concept. From there, you can preview, reorder using the same drag arrow options, or select or deselect questions based on whichever ones you want to include. And if you want to create your own questions, you can do so using the create new questions or the add questions options. The first will allow you to create questions related to any concept on CK-12 and tag them to a lesson that you've created or one of our concepts. And the second option adds questions to the existing concept that you're in. Once you're in the question editor, you can pick the type of question first, and that will kind of set up the whole editor to match that type. Our options include multiple choice, select all that apply, true, false, which you can use for any binary choice option as well, fill in the blank, short answer, drag and drop is a categorizing option, highlighting is almost like circling the correct answer, and that last one, our discussion option, which has no right or wrong answers, but that's used kind of as a general prompt. Great option to just know as like the end of a Plix, you'll see questions like that as well. Now, after you pick your question type, fill in the pieces, including the question, the answer, and/or distractors and hints, and level of difficulty and any details. If you're creating a question and not simply adding one to a concept, you're going to need to make sure to choose the CK-12 concept that you want to associate with, or choose your matching lesson in your library. And just like when adding new sections to a FlexBook, a new question you add will show up at the bottom of the questions already chosen for that concept. And then you can reorder it and drag it accordingly. So then how do you use quizzes? Once you've made a quiz, you have 3 options for using that quiz. You can swap out the practice included in a 2.0 FlexBook, or add the quiz if no practice exists already. You can assign the 2.0 lesson to your class, and you'll get a report on that lesson, kind of how the student engaged along with how they did on the included quiz. And if you just want to report, but you don't want to attach it to a lesson, you can assign the quiz directly, and that will give you the report that goes with that. The final option is to use custom questions by embedding them into a lesson. We call these inline questions, and they can be great to help students learn as they work their way through a lesson. However, you will not get a report for these questions, and since they're geared towards learning versus assessment, students will need to successfully complete each question before moving on to the next one. So we do recommend that you include feedback for wrong answers if you intend to use a CK-12 quiz in this manner. The last piece I want to talk about before I go live for a few minutes is talking about options for reports. Now, if you swap out practice and you assign the 2.0 lesson, or you assign a quiz directly, it will generate a report for that quiz. The report score is based on the % of questions that were correct out of the total number of questions. And this is different from our adaptive practice. Our adaptive practice has a goal of 10 correct, regardless of the number of questions that it took them to get to that goal. And just like in practice, if you're looking at our reports and you click on any specific score, it will pop up the details for all attempts for that quiz. For quizzes attached to 2.0 lessons, you can also see information under the lesson insights. And you can see here the time on lesson, the quiz score, and then also the engagement for that lesson. And while practice gives you that time spent and the skill level, the quiz gives you the actual % score and fraction that goes with that. So with that, I'm going to go live again, and we are going to talk about how you can customize. And again, as I said, we're flying through this stuff just so you have a sense of what's happening, but you can go ahead and try some of this out and check out our quick overviews to dig a little deeper. But in this particular lesson, I can click on practice. My student would drop directly into it. And because I own this, I have a few options. I can choose a different practice. I can switch this to a quiz. And under preview, I have the option to customize this. So I'm going to choose that customize option. And it will drop me into my quiz editor. And the first thing I'm going to do is say seasons, because that will remind me that this is what I'm working off of. I can set my attempt options, my time limit. I can allow students to pause and resume. And here I can reset this to, let's say, 10 different questions or something like that. When I click outside and it saves it, it's going to give me that warning pop-up that I talked about. I want to drop directly into the questions and edit them. A reminder just to click on that pencil edit icon and drop into here. And you can see that I have different choices. I can complete the sentence using these questions. And it looks like I might have tagged some other stuff in here. So I'm going to go ahead and explore that after. But I can go ahead and say I'm going to pick this choice right here. I'm going to pick this choice right here. I can see what's happening here. And you're going to have the daily path. I can actually try it out. See, oh, how's that going? I can see the hints that are attached for students and figure out all those pieces. And I can reorder these. I can say I want this here and reorder as I work my way through. I can also scroll all the way to the top. I can pick different authors here, pieces here, and I can add my own questions here. Now, because I'm in this concept for seasons, when I click add question, it's going to auto tag to that particular concept. And let's say I could say, when is fall in the Northern Hemisphere? And if I want multiple choices, 3 or more, then I'd use our multiple choice option. If I just wanted 2 choices, I could click on true, false. And then I would say, okay, well, let's say September, or I could say December. And then out of those options, we kind of had to see how that played out. My answers, I could choose feedback. I could say, think about the weather. If I wanted to add some feedback, I could add a hint with that same option. How is this different in different parts of the world? All sorts of options as I go through. And then if I wanted to tag it to that concept, that's great. If, for example, I didn't have one, I can always search for concepts. So I can search for seasons in there, or I could search for something in my library if I was looking for something in my library with a lesson title that I built myself. So different options as you go through. I can add grades, standards, and all sorts of things. Now, when I submit this, I could preview that question, or I could say I'm done with this, and it's gonna, should have added it to that particular lesson as we go through. So let's go ahead back to the quiz, and it will show up at the bottom of the quiz that we were working off of. So it's saving my quiz and going from there. So that's how you're going to add your own questions. You're going to add your own pieces. And we'll see that I have this seasons practice in the quiz. I'm going to go ahead and open that up so you can see what it looks like. It has 14 questions in it. It had the 10, the couple extra ones that I did, and I can preview this question. And we can see the tilt of the Earth's axis, and I can skip my way through and go ahead and play out at that particular quiz piece. So I created a quiz. I added a question to myself as I'm going in. It's going to show up at the bottom of there. I can edit this further. So I could go ahead and edit this quiz further, see some different questions as we go through from here. Nope, and I'm going to have to figure out why it's not loading, but we won't worry about that one right now. If I wanted to edit it further, you should be able to go in and edit it from there. Different options to use it at this point in time. So I'm going to go ahead and assign it to my class. I can assign directly to CK-12 or Google Classroom from CK-12, or I could do that from within Canvas or Schoology. So that would be one way to get an option. I could go ahead in and I could go back to my library. I could open up my FlexBook and my lesson that I'm working off of. So this particular piece. And I could actually take this lesson. And because this is the copy that I'm working off of, inside that lesson, I can swap out that practice for a quiz. Switch this to a quiz option right here. And then notice, this is why I say make sure to title it with something useful. This is the seasons practice that I want to work off of. And I'm going to go ahead and scroll down and click add. And that is going to take the practice that was there originally and swap out a quiz. So now at the bottom corner, you will see that quiz option, view quiz option. I'm not going to do that if I'm editing in another tab. I want to make sure I'm only making changes to my Flexbook in one place. And I can view that quiz and preview it. Or I could say, nope, actually, let's switch this back to a practice. And I'm going to save that practice and it's going to swap it back in. So you have some options there in terms of how that is happening and what's happening. And it looks like I didn't actually save this practice as we go through. So you can go ahead and swap it out that way. And I will double check why that's not loading right now with our team, and we'll get that fixed by the end of today. So we talked about how to customize practice and create a quiz. We talked about how to add that in here. Again, you can find in your library the quiz I just made. You can find the lessons that I was editing. I can create a brand new quiz from here, starting from scratch as I go through. I can also create a brand new textbook from here, starting from scratch as I go through. So remember, your library is where to start new stuff or to find stuff that you've done. And then as I go through from here, I could actually, the last option would be to take this quiz. And if I want to use this quiz inside a lesson, 14 questions is probably a little bit much for that, but that's okay. I could embed this as inline questions. And the embed code that I get here would work just like the embed code for a Plix, where it would take that and it would put it inside a lesson. So I'm going to show you just what that looks like for 2 seconds by picking a subject option. And our middle school math content has inline questions like that. So I'm just going to pull up an example to show you how that plays out. And that way you can get a sense of what that looks like. So inside these lessons, you have, here's an interactive that's embedded, just the interactive, not the full Plix. And then here's those inline questions. So this is how your quiz would show up if you chose to use it as inline questions. And then if you are looking at any particular class and assignment, just know that you would have different options for reports that would show kind of all of the detailed things, just like you would for our standard practice. But that would be a little bit different because it's the true assessment score versus a percentage score from there. So I want to make sure we have some time for questions and we can talk about using these. So I'm going to actually stop here for Q&A, and then we'll go from there.
Great. Thanks, Katie. So I see Ken asked, could students exhaust the number of questions available without getting 10 correct? And Laramie had flagged this to answer this question live.
Yeah, so our goal of questions is inside our platform. So that question would come up when you were talking about practice. So here you can see at the bottom of this lesson, you have practice. If I put it as a quiz, then they're just going to go through the questions in the quiz. Whether that quiz has 3 questions or 15 questions, every student is going to get the same number of questions. For practice itself, you could, in general, I've seen that happen in science more than math. Math has more questions because you have more kind of variations of, 2 plus 3 and 2 plus 4 and 2 plus 5. But sometimes there's only so many different concept or knowledge questions about a lesson. And if, let's say, they were doing 30, 40 questions in a lesson and they could run out of questions without getting 10 correct, you have the option to reset that for them. And so go ahead and reset that if they need to start over. But yes, they could run out before they get to that particular piece. Other questions on quizzes and using quizzes.
Katie, is it, if they were to run into that issue, would they end up being stuck with a score of less than 100% in their report card? They might have a 70% after answering all the questions, and that's maybe how you would know.
I mean, yes. And if they brought it up to you, then you could choose to reset that and give them another try at that practice. And that's probably the best option if you want to give them the opportunity to get to 100% for that goal. Otherwise, the ones that I see where students have a goal of less than 100% correct in practice, it's usually because they just stopped trying and decided that was good enough and turned it in. Or your expectation for your class is they get 80% or something like that. So did that answer the question? What other questions do we have coming in on quizzes? I know that's pretty short. We didn't have time to go into all of the details for that. We did talk about swapping it out, practice versus quizzes and things like that. But I want to make sure that we have some opportunity to go from there. And the rest of it, I usually just recommend that you start playing around with our quiz editor, see what happens, go from there, and then try that at that point. Other questions in there that we should answer before we move forward?
Nope, just a reminder that this is being recorded and will be available on our website. So for anybody wondering, this will be available.
Awesome. Great. So let's swap back to our keynote. We can talk about after customization. So the thing that we're talking about here is our assignment options first. So I mentioned this briefly as we were going through. The first choice is to assign to class. So you can choose to assign a 2.0 lesson, and that will bring the attached practice or the quiz with it. And that allows you to assign kind of the lesson and the practice. If you're using CK-12 and Google, you can actually assign multiple ones all at the same time. But in general, you're going to be assigning a single lesson with the attached practice. If you are looking at an original read or a quiz or something like that, check that assign to class option on the left side if you're in kind of our older platform. And just note that if you assign the practice at the top of something like that with that orange button on the bottom, that's the broad practice across our lessons, and it doesn't necessarily tie directly to the lesson that you're there. Our 2.0 books do a better job of kind of tying and narrowing down what you have there. And then make sure that your students click turn in. So if you don't see any grade for students in your report, then make sure that the students are actually opening the assignment from wherever it's been assigned, doing the work, and then clicking turn in, which is right where you have an assign button. They're going to have a turn in button. The next option is to simply share. So if you don't need a report, you don't need graded stuff, you just want to share an option. Let's say you're making kind of a real world application, or a lesson that just has text that you don't need a grade on, you just want to share with your class. Or you want to share the whole Flexbook as a resource to your class. Go ahead and click share. That first share option will share it on social media or to Google Classroom or in an email. Share to class is for CK-12 classes. And then the other option is to just simply copy the URL at the top. And that will allow you to kind of share that resource with anything. So on your class website, in another learning management system, whatever that looks like. And we do recommend doing that for that whole Flexbook so students can kind of see that resource. Just make sure that they do assignments through the assignment link. The last option for sharing, you can kind of see at the bottom there, that download PDF option that's available for any customized content. And we don't really recommend that because you lose all the interactivity, you lose the auto grading pieces, but we do know that some students need hard copies of that. Or they don't have access to the internet when they're home. So go ahead and download that PDF as needed. And this question came up earlier, publishing our Flexbook. So for any custom Flexbook or other resource that you created under that create new option, besides quizzes right now, you can click on the publish option in the table of contents or the same option on the left side for any individual modality. So this is going to start showing up. So that's first option is you can choose that option and publish it. And then what happens? Your book becomes available via search. And so it means that other users can search for that topic and find it on there. It's why you'll see content on photojournalism or content on random other things on our platform. You guys can go search literature and see what comes up, all sorts of things. CK-12 has its main stuff. And then the next stuff is the community contributed piece. Why would you publish it? It makes it easier for you to access it, your colleagues to access it, your students to access it, and then it adds to kind of the resources that are available. And if you want to add this to a schools page, then you can add any published content to a schools page, so you will need to publish that first. And those are great resources. So what's a schools page? Here's some examples. This kind of organizes and groups a bunch of different resources for your school or district. And it helps others near you find and maybe even reach out to you and collaborate on creating content for your school, district, state, something like that. If you don't already have a schools page for your school with someone kind of managing it, then go ahead and click on the Can't Find Your School option up at the top there. And that will open up a form that you can fill out to get your school added. So I'm going to turn this over to Dan to do some kind of additional programming logistic resource information for you. Because we have about 5 or 6 minutes left in here, but this is our last call for questions. So we want to make sure that we get all of your questions answered. So as he's going through and sharing these resources with you, please make sure you add any additional questions you have in Q&A so we can make sure to get to them before we close out today.
Thanks, Katie. So we have our testimonials page, which can be found in the footer under the Explore menu or at ck12.org/testimonials. This is a great place to hear from students and educators about CK-12 products and how they're being used in the classroom. Plus, you'll hear why many of our teachers and districts choose to customize content on CK-12. You can check these out in a variety of stories, reasons to use CK-12, and strategies for implementation that others have shared with us. Please feel free to browse or filter based on your role or the topic. We also have our LMS pages. So for those interested in making assignments and using one of our integrated learning management systems, so either Google Classroom, Canvas, or Schoology, we've built landing pages for those integrations, complete with matching videos, help desk articles, and more. You can access them via our tools and apps page, which is found in our footer, or directly at the matching URLs, so ck12.org/g-classroom or /canvas or /schoology. If you need any assistance or are exploring CK-12, you can ask Flexi if you're in a math or science FlexBook 2.0, or you can visit ck12.org/help or click on help in our footer for quick articles and tips for using CK-12. If you haven't tried it out yet, just go ahead and ask Flexi how to customize a quiz or do something else on CK-12. Just please note, we all love Flexi so very much, but Flexi, our teaching assistant, is in its beta phase. So please do give us feedback to help us keep improving. We also mentioned at the beginning of this webinar that if you've never visited CK-12's YouTube channel, please check it out to see the quick overviews videos, as well as a wide range of videos from content tutorials to testimonials to previous webinars. You can access that directly on YouTube or via the link at the bottom of our webinars page. With that, please don't forget to check out our webinars page, ck12.org/webinars, to see archived recordings of this and other webinars that we've done in the past. Feel free to share this with other colleagues who couldn't make it today. Plus, keep an eye out for upcoming webinars as we add more to our schedule. And in 2020, we converted our certified educator program to an on-demand, self-paced course. If you were intrigued by what you saw today and want to dive deeper into all of CK-12's tools and resources, please consider joining a community of educators, becoming certified at no cost and on your own schedule. You can go to ck12.org/certified and click join to register for the program and be placed in a class. You'll also get a really cool digital badge for your email signature to show off your new certification. And as always, I know it's the end of the school year and everybody is so busy, but we do want to thank you again for joining us tonight. We'll stay on with any additional questions that you might have, but feel free, if you have to run, to reach out to us at any point at support@ck12.org. And don't forget to let your social networks know about CK-12. We're on all socials as CK-12 Foundation. So that's it for today's webinar. As we promised, we will stay on for any additional questions that you would like our team to answer.
Thanks, Dan. It looks like our team's done a great job. The email, if you have questions or it sounded like someone was having an issue with some tech piece for some of their students, please email support@ck12.org. Our help desk is ck12.org/help. Our email for support is support@ck12.org. And definitely those pieces in here, I'm just going to go backwards for a second on this thing. And I just stopped sharing. So let's try that one more time. In here, if I go ahead and I share this particular piece on our customizing FlexBook part, I'm just going to actually share this screen, and that way I can jump really quickly. But our webinar or YouTube, this quick overviews, someone was asking about how to use it with Schoology and different pieces. The quick overviews has options, and those videos are actually at the bottom of these things. We actually have updated videos that we've added in there. So we have those informations available for you as you go through from there. And I'm going to go ahead and swap back to here in case there's any other live questions to share.
And Katie, we do have a couple questions that are coming in. Ken asked that he's been asked to lead professional development session for his district as they switch from Discovery Ed to CK-12 for next year. And he asked, would the information from this webinar be a good place to start, or are there other resources that you would recommend he start with?
Yeah, so this is what I would consider kind of an advanced option. It's really the customization piece. It's that next level. If you click on Explore and then you click on Webinars, That's going to take you to all of our recorded webinars. And so I might start with our kind of introduction one. So this like CK-12, a solution for flexible learning one that's right here on the top right. That's a great introduction. It includes integration strategies as well. So that would be an option. Also, you're welcome to email jumpstart@ck12.org, which is our outreach team's email address. And we can help you with kind of implementation and getting started. So that's a great option as well. If you're starting your first book, if you're starting your first customization, this is probably the best place to start. Or as I said, kind of at the bottom of this page is that link to our YouTube channel. And here, if you just want little quick ones, here's your kind of finding, using search, finding community content, our insights, and then we get into our basic edits. So these are, as you can see, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 2 minutes. Basic edits, images, videos, embedding options. So those are some basic pieces for getting started with the editing piece if you don't want to watch this whole video. I also do really recommend our certified educator program because we have an entire section. We went through stuff really quickly today, but we break this webinar into 2 parts inside that program. So one on the FlexBook customization and one on the quiz or practice customization. So go ahead, and if I go backwards in here, back to our main page, we can see, if I go over here under Explore, our certified educator program, and that will help you get a sense and dive deeper from there. But also feel free to reach out to us. If you click on that certified educator program page, it will jump you to kind of all of the resources to get started and give you some resources if you need any help. And you can kind of see here some alumni and then our email for educators that are looking to do stuff. So go ahead and check that out.
Katie, we have another question from Cindy asking, is there a way to force students to complete the readings and videos before they do an adaptive practice?
There is not currently a force option from here. This actually, I'm going to show you kind of what a class looks like. So if I go ahead and I open up this class right here, my fall demo class, and I open up, this is one of the reasons why I recommend 2.0. So we didn't really get into reports as much right now. But if I look at reports, you can see here the skill level for practice and my quiz for mastery piece. If I go ahead and click on score and heat map, it gives me kind of just those pieces for that. But this is inside a 2.0 lesson. So I can actually click on class insights and access it here or from the assignment link. And this information is going to give me, as I showed you, if there was a quiz attached, it would give me the information, and I'll just even show you what it looks like here. You can see how students did on their practice that was attached to this, as well as how long they spent and where they spent their time. So I can see here that this student started 7 seconds and then did this basically straight down with next to no time spent on anything. And I actually was in a middle school class earlier this week, and the teacher showed them what they could see, and they're like, wait, what? So I would recommend that you say you must spend X time on here. I recommend kind of showing them that you can see that and encouraging them and teaching that as a study skill as part of that particular piece, even though we don't have that set as something that is required. Because there are situations where teachers will allow students just to do the practice as review. They don't necessarily need to read through the whole lesson. So I think we answered that piece. It looks like for PD, I'm just going to put a note in there. Just email jumpstart@ck12.org if you're looking for help with integration with things. So I think with that, we're out of questions. So we're going to wrap up today's webinar. By all means, reach out to us. Go ahead and check out this recording. We went through stuff very quickly today just to give you a sense of where to start exploring. And you're welcome to reach out to us with any questions or issues if you run into any. And we'll get that one little glitch that was happening earlier for me all sorted out today. And you should be good to go from there. Awesome. Oh, looks like we got a couple more questions. It looks like these are all different pieces. And yeah, just related to kind of skipping to the practice. Show them these insights and show them that you can see what they're doing and encourage them, or say, I'm only going to give you credit if you've actually spent time on this lesson and gone through it and read through the pieces. And that will help with that part. Okay, awesome. We'll have a great evening or morning, depending on where you are, and we hope to see you for our next webinar.